You weren't invited." That's what the email from my own mother said. Cold, final, like I was a guest, not her daughter. But what they didn't expect was that I kept every receipt, every tuition payment, every therapy bill, even the flowers for the wedding they said I couldn't attend. I didn't blow up. I built a folder. And after a decade of silence, I finally opened it. If you've ever felt used by your own family, watch them celebrate without you after you kept the lights on, this story will show you how to take your power back without raising your voice. Because when I placed that folder on the table at the rehearsal dinner they didn't want me at and played the audio of them laughing about using me, they didn't smile anymore. If you keep waiting for them to say thank you, you'll wait your whole life. Watch this before you give again. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now, let's start the story together. "We've decided it's best you not attend the wedding," the email read. Those words sat on my screen like a cold shadow, cutting through the quiet of my San Diego apartment. It was not a typical wedding invitation, not by any stretch. No floral design, no warm greetings. Just a plain message from my mother, Valerie, dressed in formality and finality. That was my invite, cold, clean, and final. I sat at my small kitchen table, the morning sun spilling through the blinds and casting stripes across my half-sipped coffee, now long gone cold. The familiar hum of the city outside contrasted sharply with the stillness that had settled inside me. I read the email again, then once more, as if repetition could change the sting it carried. "No, we love you. No, thank you for everything. Just a clinical dismissal." It was like being erased with a few keystrokes. The voice of my sister Kelsey echoed in my mind, a memory from years ago when she laughed and said, "You're more of a maid of honor type, behind the scenes." Back then, I thought she meant I was the dependable one, the quiet supporter. I never imagined that behind the scenes was code for being off the list entirely. I didn't reply to the email. There was nothing to say, not anymore. Instead, I closed my laptop softly and opened a different folder on my desktop, one labeled Receipts. It was a digital archive, a silent testament to years of support. I scrolled through PDF files and screenshots, tuition bills, rent receipts, therapy payments, and bank statements, each one a reminder of the weight I had carried silently for the family I once thought I belonged to. My gaze drifted to a small cactus on the windowsill, spiky, resilient, and seemingly indifferent to the sun's warmth. It was a gift I had bought on a whim months ago, half as a joke. Now it stared back at me like a mirror, reflecting my own quiet endurance. The room felt muted, the air thick with memories and unspoken words. My coffee sat forgotten, its bitterness matching the heaviness in my chest. The world outside went on, but inside, I was suspended in a moment of reckoning. I whispered to myself, barely audible. I wasn't family. I was funding. The words hung in the air, a quiet surrender and an awakening all at once. With a steady hand, I clicked open the first file in the folder, Kelsey's tuition payment from 3 years ago. The numbers were precise, the dates clear. I began copying the documents into a new folder, my resolve hardening with every click. This wasn't just about money, it was about acknowledgement, about finally seeing what had been invisible for so long. The morning sun climbed higher, but the room remained still, caught in the freeze of a cold truth. It started with a simple phone call. I was just getting settled into my first real job, fresh out of college and eager to prove myself in the fintech world. The apartment was small, just enough space for me and a few cherished books, but it felt like the beginning of something. My phone rang late one evening, the kind of call that promised warmth. It was Mom. "Sweetie, just until we figure things out," she said, her voice soft, almost too sweet. I didn't hesitate. I said yes, too fast. That was the phrase she always used, just until the tuition got paid, just until the rent was covered, just until the bills got sorted. Each just until stretched a little further, a little longer, until it blurred into forever. I was the sister who made sure Kelsey's life ran smoothly, the silent provider behind every door. Mom had a way of reminding me where I stood without saying it outright. "You make more than us," she would say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Those words always came with a price tag, a subtle expectation that I'd keep giving. I wanted to believe it was love. I wanted to believe it was family. As the months passed, what started as a one-time favor became a pattern. My contributions didn't just cover tuition anymore. They extended to books, groceries, rent for a better apartment when Kelsey wanted to move off campus, and even therapy sessions when she wasn't comfortable seeking help at school. The phrase, "just this once," lost all meaning. I watched from the sidelines as Kelsey rolled her eyes when I mentioned anything about budgeting. Her texts sometimes called me controlling, a word that stung more than it should have. One Christmas, I gifted her a MacBook Air, proud of my thoughtful gesture. She scrunched her nose and said, "I wanted the Pro." "This one's kind of basic." Dad laughed it off, saying maybe next year. Mom said nothing. One day, I received a fraud alert on a card I barely used anymore, the one I had temporarily given Mom to cover groceries years ago. Charges appeared from stores I'd never visited, amounts that didn't make sense. That night, I sat at my desk, the glow from my laptop screen the only light in the room. I opened a blank spreadsheet and labeled the first tab, tuition. Then came rent, therapy, and finally, fraud. With each entry, I felt the weight of years of quiet sacrifice, of unacknowledged support. The numbers told a story my family never dared to speak aloud, a story of taking without giving, of expectation without gratitude. I renamed the folder on my desktop from Receipts to Receipts Full. It was a subtle shift, but it marked a profound change within me. The hurt softened, replaced by a growing resolve. I wasn't just the giver anymore. I was a woman, ready to take control of her own narrative. The apartment felt colder that night, but I sat taller, knowing that the time for denial was over. The foundation of my silence had cracked, and from that fissure, clarity began to rise. I wasn't on the guest list, but I showed up anyway, with proof. The evening air was cool and salty, the sound of quiet waves crashing against the cliffs near La Jolla Cove, adding a surreal backdrop to what was supposed to be a joyful celebration. Twinkling string lights draped overhead cast a soft glow on the neatly set tables, where fine silverware and crystal glasses sparkled in the fading light. The guests sipped wine and nibbled on hors d'oeuvres, chatting and laughing in anticipation of the big day ahead. I stood just inside the entrance, calm and composed, dressed modestly in a simple navy dress that didn't scream for attention. In my hand, I clutched a manila folder, one that carried years of silent sacrifice and overlooked generosity. Every document inside was a testament to what I had given and what I had been denied in return. As I stepped forward, all eyes turned toward me. The murmurs quieted, and the warmth of the party was replaced by a sudden, heavy tension. My mother, Valerie, approached quickly, her voice low but sharp through clenched teeth. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her eyes narrowing like daggers. I didn't respond with anger or explanations. Instead, I placed the folder carefully on the polished wooden table. The familiar rustle of paper punctuated the silence. Inside were bank records annotated with notes, credit card statements, and a printed transcript of a recorded phone call. The evidence was meticulous, undeniable. Without raising my voice, I began to speak clearly, reading off 3 recent charges made on my old credit card, all connected to pre-wedding expenses: the spa days, the catered meals, the last-minute floral arrangements. Every dollar, every cent traced back to me. Then I pressed play on my phone. The 15-second audio clip filled the space. It was my mother and sister, their laughter light and mocking. "Danielle's generosity is endless," they said, as if it were a joke. The words stung, exposing the truth that had been whispered behind closed doors for years. Tyler, Kelsey's fiancé, looked at her in disbelief. "Wait, you used her card for the wedding?" His voice was low but carried enough weight to draw the attention of the entire gathering. Kelsey's face paled, her mask of control slipping for just a moment. The room seemed to hold its breath. I closed the folder calmly and looked around the table, meeting the eyes of relatives who had silently watched this unfold. "This isn't revenge," I said quietly yet firmly. "It's record-keeping." Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence louder than any confrontation. No raised voices, no dramatic outbursts, just undeniable truth laid bare. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the distant waves continued their steady rhythm, reminding me that some things, like tides and truths, are inevitable. The wedding happened. They smiled for pictures, danced under the glowing string lights, and toasted to a future I was no longer invited to share. I watched it all unfold from the quiet solitude of my apartment, miles away from the celebration they claimed was so joyous. There was no bitterness in me, just a steady resolve as I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the flicker of my laptop screen and a growing pile of emails and text messages. In those days after the rehearsal, my inbox flooded with accusations. Words like cruel, selfish, and unforgivable scrolled endlessly. Valerie's angry emails burned with betrayal, painting me as the villain who shattered a family. Kelsey's texts were sharper, blaming me for ruining what she called her day. Even Greg left a half-hearted voicemail pleading for calm. "Let's not blow this up," he said, as if all I had done was minor drama. But I wasn't interested in their chaos. With quiet determination, I began severing the invisible ties that bound me. I canceled every shared credit card, unlinked grocery delivery accounts, and revoked streaming subscriptions they had silently relied on for years. The digital chains I once held slipped through my fingers, one by one. Then the final blow came. My alma mater notified me that someone had attempted to forge a financial form in my name, a familiar name, Kelsey. Thankfully, the attempt was flagged and rejected before any damage was done. The confirmation was both a warning and a strange relief. Amid the storm of messages, a ping from Elise, my coworker, appeared on my phone. "Are you okay? You've been quiet." I stared at her message, the first genuine concern I had received in weeks. With a small smile, I typed back, "I'm good. Actually, better." That night, I deleted the shared budgeting app that had been the map of my sacrifices. The app's icon disappeared from my phone, a small but powerful symbol of my newfound independence. I moved to the window, opening it wide to let in the fresh night air. My gaze settled on the cactus I had named Enough. Once overlooked, it now stood tall and thriving, basking in the sunlight I never noticed before. I reached down, gently watered the resilient plant, and felt a quiet strength take root within me. For the first time in years, I acted without explanation or apology. The silence was not empty. It was full of possibility, terrifying and empowering all at once. This was my closure, my reclaiming of self. And as the city lights twinkled beyond, I knew I was finally ready to live for me. It wasn't a package. No one rings the doorbell like that unless they want forgiveness, or at least some kind of answer. The sound startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not Greg, my father. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of years pressing on my chest, but the knock came again, softer this time, as if he wasn't sure he belonged anymore. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Greg stood there looking older than I remembered, his shoulders slumped, eyes tired and rimmed with worry. The man who once seemed so distant now felt fragile, almost like a stranger. Without a word, I stepped aside and let him in. The apartment was warm but minimalist, reflecting the fresh start I was trying to build. A single chair faced the window, catching the last golden rays of the early evening sun. Greg took the seat quietly. We sat in silence for a moment. the kind of silence that's heavy with things left unsaid. Finally, he spoke. "Your sister isn't doing well," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I said nothing. I just looked out the window. He continued, mentioning family dinners with empty chairs, Mom not being herself these days. "She asks about you sometimes," he said, glancing my way. I kept my gaze fixed outside, my thoughts distant. Then he asked, "Just one meal, for old time's sake?" The question hung in the air, weighted with years of absence and neglect. I turned to him slowly and replied, "Old times didn't feed me." Greg's face fell, the regret clear but silent. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. It was a picture of Kelsey and me as children, smiling, carefree, unaware of the future that would divide us. He placed it gently on the counter. Without hesitation, I flipped the photo face down, turning away from the past that held more pain than joy. As Greg stood to leave, the apartment felt colder, emptier. I whispered quietly, almost to myself, "You all taught me silence. I'm finally fluent." The door clicked shut behind him, sealing the moment. There was no music, no hug, no apology, just the sound of a quiet revolution taking hold within me. 6 months had passed since the last message, the last call, the last attempt to reach me. No one called. No one needed to. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of meaning. It was mine. On a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of my new apartment, spilling warmth over the plants I'd nurtured into life. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and old postcards that adorned my fridge, small reminders of the life I was building, piece by piece on my own terms. An envelope lay on the kitchen counter, a simple thing that carried profound weight. It was a thank you letter from my alma mater, acknowledging a scholarship donation made in my name. For the first time, I saw my own name attached to something good, something lasting. I slipped the envelope into a new folder on my laptop, labeled simply, "Yours, finally." Later, I wandered through Balboa Park, the soft crunch of leaves beneath my feet matching the quiet rhythm of my thoughts. The park was alive with birdsong and gentle breezes, a sanctuary away from the noise of my past. The silence here wasn't absence, it was space, space to breathe, to heal, to grow. That afternoon, I met Elise and a couple of friends for brunch at a cozy cafe nearby. The clinking of cups and low murmur of conversation filled the air as we shared stories and laughter. My laughter wasn't loud or forced, it was just enough, a gentle release of years held tight inside. Midway through the meal, my phone buzzed softly with a text notification. I glanced down and saw it was from Mom. Without hesitation, I left it unopened and deleted it. Some messages don't deserve a response. Later that evening, as I settled in, I tucked a sticky note into my wallet. On it, I had written words that had become my mantra. "You don't owe them your peace." It was a quiet declaration, a shield against old wounds and new doubts. Sometimes winning isn't about walking away. Sometimes it's about knowing why you did. And with that thought, I closed my eyes, feeling the steady beat of my own heart, a rhythm finally my own. Sometimes silence isn't about absence. It's the space we finally give ourselves to breathe. I didn't walk away to hurt them. I walked away to find peace. Families don't always say thank you, and love isn't always fair, but that doesn't mean we stop being good people. Setting boundaries isn't betrayal. It's choosing your own well-being when no one else will. If this story reminded you of a time you had to choose yourself, I invite you to share your thoughts. Sometimes, just hearing someone else's truth helps us make peace with our own.